Eric Stanton hadn't meant to deliver the wrong box. He was only filling in for his buddy's courier job for a few days, while trying to scrape enough together to keep the lights on for his 6-year-old son, Wyatt. "Dad, do you have to go again?" Wyatt's little voice tugged at his heart as Eric knelt to zip up the boy's dinosaur backpack. "Just one more delivery, champ. Miss Jenna's gonna stay with you till I'm back, okay?" he said, brushing Wyatt's curls out of his eyes. Wyatt nodded, wrapping his arms around Eric's neck. "Bring back something cool." Eric chuckled, but his heart felt heavy. "Like a paperclip from a CEO's desk, cooler than that," Wyatt whispered. Eric kissed his son's forehead, grabbed the last box from the passenger seat of the beat-up van, and double-checked the address. Stanton Logistics, Suite 47A, Skyview Tower. Fitting name, considering this was the tallest building he'd ever stepped foot in. The package was light, probably some tech part or paperweight worth more than his monthly rent. He weaved through the marble lobby, trying not to gawk at the glass chandeliers or the security guard who looked like he belonged in a spy movie. When he reached the private elevator and pressed the button, it lit up red. "Authorized personnel only," said the guard behind him. "I've got a delivery for Stanton Logistics," Eric replied, lifting the box. The guard raised an eyebrow. "You're late." Eric offered a sheepish grin. Story of my life. The elevator opened with a soft chime. Eric stepped inside, unaware his life was about to change completely. Camille Sullivan didn't look up from her laptop. "Leave it on the table," she said without glancing at the man who entered her glass-walled office. "Sure thing," came a voice that was deeper, warmer than she expected. Not her usual delivery guy. When she finally looked up, her breath caught. The man standing in front of her wore a navy blue courier uniform that didn't hide the fact that he was tall, strong, and had the kind of face that made women forget their own names. But what struck her wasn't just his looks, it was the tiredness in his eyes, the calloused hands holding the box, and the honesty in his expression. Like he didn't belong here, but he wasn't pretending that he did. "This isn't your usual thing, is it?" she said, shutting her laptop. He paused, surprised. "That obvious?" Camille stood from her desk, the heels of her designer pumps echoing in the glass office. "You've got drywall dust on your collar. Let me guess, construction." "Used to be," Eric said, scratching the back of his neck, "until the site shut down. I'm helping a friend out till I find something more permanent." She tilted her head, intrigued. "You always tell your whole life story to strangers," he smiled faintly. "Only when they ask," she laughed. "Fair enough." Camille stepped closer, taking the box from him. "Camille Sullivan," she offered, extending her hand. Eric Stanton," she blinked. "Like the company," he shook his head quickly. "Nope, pure coincidence. I couldn't afford a share if I tried." She studied him a moment longer. "You're honest, I like that." He let out a dry laugh. "Yeah, my ex used to say that made me bad at poker." Camille's lips twitched. She didn't know why she kept talking to him, but something about him made her want to delay her next meeting. "You know, most people who walk in here either try to sell me something or suck up to me. You're the first one who just talks," Eric shrugged. "I'm not great at selling dreams, I'm just trying to keep my kid happy and the fridge full." Her eyes softened. "You're a dad, 6-year-old boy, Wyatt. He's got more energy than 3 Red Bulls." Camille grinned. "Sounds like a handful. He's my whole world." She paused, then walked to the wall behind her desk and grabbed a small velvet box from her shelf. "Here," she said, dropping it into his hand. He opened it. Inside was a sleek silver pen with the Stanton logo engraved. "I can't take this," Eric said, trying to hand it back. "You didn't ask for anything. That's exactly why you deserve it." He stared at her, confused, grateful, stunned. "Thanks, I'll give it to Wyatt. He loves shiny things." She smiled again, then glanced at the time. "You should go before you make your son think you got eaten by billionaires." He nodded, backing toward the door. "Thanks, Miss Sullivan." "Camille," she corrected gently. As the door closed behind him, Camille sat back down, staring at the pen display on her desk. It had been a limited edition gift for board members. She'd never given one away, and she definitely hadn't smiled like that in months. Back in his van, Eric couldn't stop thinking about her Camille Sullivan. Those sharp eyes, that confident voice, and the way she'd looked at him like he wasn't invisible, he shook it off. Women like her didn't think about guys like him. She probably forgot his name the second he walked out, but Camille didn't forget. She pulled up his name in the building's security log, typing it slowly. Eric Stanton. She leaned back in her chair, tapping her nail against her lip, surprised at the strange flutter in her stomach. Then she whispered to herself, "Why the hell did you have to be that charming?" Camille stood at the edge of the rooftop garden, arms folded as the city glittered below like a constellation of grounded stars. The wind tugged at her blazer, but she didn't move. Her assistant, Leela, hovered beside her with a tablet, waiting for instructions that never came. "He's not like the others, is he?" Leela asked cautiously, eyes flicking toward Camille's profile. Camille didn't answer. She was still thinking about the way Eric had looked at her like she wasn't the most powerful person in the room, but just a woman with a name. Leila cleared her throat. "The board meeting's in 10. You wanted to finalize the proposal before push it to this afternoon," Camille said abruptly, turning away from the skyline. "And get me everything you can find on Eric Stanton, employment history, education, last known address, discreetly." Leela blinked, startled. "That's not usually your style." "I'm not asking for commentary," Camille said, already walking back toward the elevator. Eric's feet were sore by the time he got home. He tossed his keys onto the cracked kitchen counter and leaned into the doorway where Wyatt was curled on the couch with a blanket, building a spaceship out of cereal boxes and rubber bands. "Hey, buddy," he said, toeing off his boots. Wyatt's eyes lit up. "Did you bring something cool?" Eric reached into his pocket and pulled out the silver pen. Wyatt stared at it wide-eyed. "Whoa, is it a laser?" "Not quite," Eric laughed, tossing it to him gently. "But it came from a place higher than the clouds." Wyatt grinned and jabbed it toward his cardboard ship. "Then it's officially the ignition switch." Eric collapsed beside him on the couch. "You hungry? I can make grilled cheese." "I already had noodles." "Miss Jenna said they were barely edible, but I liked them." Eric chuckled, then ran a hand over his face. "How'd I end up with a critic for a son?" Wyatt shrugged. "You're lucky." He was. Even if he couldn't afford new shoes or working heat, Wyatt made every day worth crawling through. The next morning, Camille didn't wait for fate. She made the call herself. "Get me a courier," she told Leela. "For what delivery?" "None. Just send Eric Stanton up. Tell him I've got a return for yesterday's package." Leela hesitated. "Should I tell him who it's from?" "No. Let him walk in blind." By the time Eric arrived at the tower again, he was already suspicious. He hadn't expected another assignment to that floor so soon, and the fact that there was no package listed made it even stranger. Still, he needed the hours. He left Wyatt with Jenna again and made the drive downtown, wondering if he'd accidentally left behind the pen. But when he stepped out of the elevator, Camille was waiting. "You again," Eric said, eyebrows lifting. "Did I forget something?" Camille didn't answer right away. She was dressed differently today, less corporate armor, more silk blouse and subtle perfume, but her voice was still unshakably composed. "You didn't forget anything. I asked for you." Eric leaned against the doorframe. "You needed a courier with drywall dust on his collar again." She actually laughed. "No, I needed a conversation." Eric's eyes narrowed slightly. "You tracked me down for small talk." "I have a question," she said, "and I figured you're honest enough to answer it." He crossed his arms. "Try me." "What would you do," she said slowly, "if someone handed you a life you never thought you could have?" Eric blinked. "Is this a trick? Like, am I supposed to say thank you and sign over my kidneys?" Camille stepped closer. "I'm serious." He studied her, trying to read the motive behind her polished expression. "If I had a shot at giving my kid a better life, I'd take it. No hesitation." "Why?" She hesitated, then walked to her desk and picked up a folder. "Because I want to hire you." His brow furrowed. "Hire me." "To do what?" "Deliver pens professionally." She set the folder down and opened it. "To work for me," she said. "As a personal assistant." Eric blinked. "You want me to be your assistant? You're observant. You don't lie, you listen. And you can apparently manage a 6-year-old, which means you've got the patience of a saint. Those are skills most of my board members lack." He laughed under his breath. "You do realize I've never worked in an office." "I'm not looking for someone with a business degree," Camille said. "I'm looking for someone I can trust." Eric looked down at his worn sneakers, then back at her. "What's the catch?" "No catch," she said. Salaries in the folder, benefits included, you'd work from this building but the role's flexible, you'd have time with your son. He opened the folder. His throat tightened. It was more money than he'd made in the last year combined. I don't get it, he said, voice low. Why me? Camille's gaze didn't waver. Because when you walked in this office, you didn't ask for anything. And maybe that's exactly why you deserve more. Eric didn't know what to say. He closed the folder slowly. I need to think about it, he said. Of course, Camille replied. But don't take too long. I'm not used to waiting. He turned to leave, then paused at the door. Why do I feel like this is going to change everything? He asked. Camille's voice was quiet behind him. Because it already has. Eric stared at the ceiling for most of the night, his mind a tangle of numbers and possibilities. The spreadsheet Camille had handed him was still on the kitchen counter, untouched since he'd laid it there. He didn't need to reread it. The salary figure was burned into his brain, enough to fix the leaking roof. Enough to finally get Wyatt the sneakers he wanted, the ones with lights that blinked red when he ran. But it wasn't just the money that kept him awake. It was her. The way Camille had looked at him, not like she was doing him a favor, but like she expected something from him. Like she saw something he didn't even see in himself. By sunrise, he'd made his decision. He called Jenna, asked her to keep Wyatt for a few hours longer, and drove downtown with the folder still sitting on the passenger seat. When he stepped into the executive lobby, the receptionist stood before he even reached the desk. You're Mr. Stanton, right, Miss? Sullivan is expecting you. He nodded, slightly thrown by the recognition, and followed her to a different elevator sleeker than the one from before, with polished chrome walls and a faint scent of citrus. When the doors opened, he stepped out into what looked more like a private residence than an office. The floors were pale wood, the walls lined with abstract art. Camille stood beside a sprawling window, her arms crossed, her reflection softened by the morning light. You decided, she said, not turning around. I did, Eric replied. I'll take it. Camille faced him fully, her expression unreadable. Good. Because I already cleared a workspace for you. You were that confident. I prefer the word prepared. He crossed the room, stopping a few feet from her. So what exactly does a personal assistant to a CEO do? Camille's lips curved ever so slightly. Whatever I need you to, he raised an eyebrow. You always this vague, or is that just how you keep people guessing? I don't like wasting time with lists, she said. I'd rather learn what you're capable of. Eric folded his arms loosely. You're not worried I'll screw it up? No, she said, walking to a nearby cabinet and pulling out a black leather folder. But I am curious how quickly you can adapt. He took the folder and opened it. Inside were event schedules, meeting details, and a list of clients whose names he'd only ever heard in headlines. These are tonight's guests at a private dinner, she said. You'll be assisting me there. Tonight, he asked. That's a little fast. You said you were in, she said, brushing past him. That means you're in all the way. He exhaled and followed her across the room. You're not exactly easing me in. I don't ease into anything, she said over her shoulder. That's how people get complacent. As she approached her desk, she paused. There's a tailor coming in at noon. He'll take your measurements. For what? For the suit you'll wear tonight, he blinked. You're buying me a suit. I'm not sending you to a 5-star dinner in cargo pants, she said, finally looking at him again. Besides, it's an investment. He shook his head slowly. You move fast. I don't have time to move slow. He watched her for a beat, then said, You always this intense. She glanced at him with a look that carried something far more dangerous than intensity. Only around people who interest me. The words hung in the air. Eric looked away first, unsure what to make of the tightening in his chest. Later that afternoon, the tailor arrived. Camille didn't stay to observe, but she left instructions. The man was efficient, barely speaking as he measured Eric's shoulders, wrists, and inseam. He had dark circles under his eyes and a gold watch that probably cost more than Eric's van. When it was done, the man packed up silently and left without so much as a nod. Eric looked down at the sleek garment bag hanging on the coat rack. He didn't unzip it, not yet. At 6:30, he stood in front of the mirror in a crisp black suit with a narrow lapel and a deep charcoal shirt. The shoes were Italian leather. He didn't ask how Camille had found his size so quickly. He hadn't worn anything this nice since his wedding. Camille was waiting downstairs in a black car when he stepped out. She didn't say anything right away, just looked at him for a long moment. He shifted under her gaze. "Too much." "No," she said quietly. "Exactly enough." The car pulled away from the curb and the silence between them stretched. Camille didn't seem bothered by it. She just stared out the window, her fingers resting lightly on the leather seat. "You ever get nervous before these things?" Eric asked. "Not anymore," he nodded. "Must be nice." She turned to him. "You get nervous," he hesitated. "Yeah. But I don't let it stop me." "That's good," she replied. "Because you're about to be surrounded by people who can smell fear like blood in the water," he exhaled slowly. "Great, that's comforting." Camille gave the faintest laugh. "Just stay close to me. If anyone asks, you're my new executive liaison. That a real title. It is now." When they arrived at the venue, Eric didn't expect the valet to open Camille's door before the car had fully stopped. He didn't expect the doorman to bow slightly as they passed, or the woman at the reception desk to greet Camille by name without being told. The room was all glass and gold, filled with men in tailored suits and women in gowns that looked airbrushed onto their skin. Waiters floated around with trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres Eric couldn't pronounce. Camille didn't bother introducing him to everyone at once. She took his arm lightly, like it was an afterthought, and led him through the crowd with practiced ease. When they reached a corner near the terrace, she leaned closer. "You're my shadow tonight," she murmured. "Listen, learn, speak only when necessary." He nodded. "Understood." "Also," she paused, her eyes locking with his, "don't let anyone make you feel small. You're here because I put you here." "That's reason enough." Before he could respond, a man in a navy tuxedo approached with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Camille," he said smoothly, "didn't expect to see you arrive with company." Camille's entire posture shifted, still poised, but sharper now. "This is Eric Stanton," she said. "He's with me." The man's smile flickered. "New hire," something like that. Eric extended a hand. "Nice to meet you." The man glanced at it, then shook it with the kind of grip that tried too hard. "David Mercer," he said. "Camille and I go way back." "College days." "That was a lifetime ago," Camille replied, her tone cool. "Some people like to remember the past," David said. "Others like to rewrite it." Eric watched Camille's face. No change, but something in her eyes darkened. "I don't have the time or the interest to rewrite anything," she said. "Excuse us." She turned, steering Eric away before David could respond. "Friend of yours?" Eric asked once they were out of earshot. Not remotely. Eric glanced back. "He seemed like a snake." "He is," Camille said flatly. "But he's also a major investor. You let people like that fund you." "I let people like that think they matter," she said, "until they don't." There was something in her voice he hadn't heard before, not confidence, something colder, protective, strategic. He understood then, this wasn't a woman who'd stumbled into power. She'd built it, brick by brutal brick, and somehow she'd chosen to let him walk beside her. For the first time, he wondered what it would cost. The rain came down in sheets the next morning, painting the city in silver and shadow. Eric stood beneath the awning outside Skyview Tower, soaked from the knees down and gripping Wyatt's hand as they waited for Leela to buzz them in. Wyatt craned his neck back, staring up at the building's glass crown. "Are we going to the top again?" "Almost," Eric said, brushing water from the boy's jacket. "Camille said we could stop by before school. She wants to meet you." Wyatt looked up at him with wide eyes. "Is she the one who gave me the pen?" Eric smiled. "That's her." The elevator doors opened to Camille's penthouse floor, and Wyatt's hand tightened around his. Camille stood near the elevator, dressed in slate gray slacks and a pale blouse, her hair pulled back with surgical precision. But when she saw Wyatt, something in her face shifted. "So this is the famous Wyatt," she said, crouching slightly to meet his eyes. "You're taller than I imagined." Wyatt tilted his head. "People say that when they don't know what else to say." Camille blinked, then laughed a short, surprised sound. "You're right. That was lazy of me." "Would you like some hot chocolate?" Wyatt looked at Eric for confirmation. Eric nodded. "I guess," Wyatt said, still watching her warily. Camille led them to the lounge, where Leela had already laid out mugs and small pastries on a low marble table. Wyatt took a seat and examined everything like he was entering a science lab. Eric lowered his voice as Camille stepped beside him. You didn't have to do all this. I know, she said, but I wanted to. He studied her face. You don't usually let people in like this. Camille didn't deny it. He's part of you, that makes him important. Wyatt piped up from the couch. Do you have a robot butler? Camille looked over. Not yet, but I'm open to the idea, Eric chuckled. You've officially won him over. They stayed only a short while long enough for Wyatt to thoroughly investigate Camille's art collection and declare her hallway unnecessarily shiny. As Eric guided him out, Camille reached into a drawer and handed Eric a small envelope. What's this? He asked. Just open it later. He tucked it into his jacket without arguing. After dropping Wyatt off at school, Eric parked 3 blocks from their apartment and opened the envelope. Inside was a single card handwritten in Camille's sharp, elegant script. You're not a guest in my world anymore. You belong here. Let me show you how much. Beneath the note was a sleek black key fob. He closed his eyes briefly, overwhelmed. Then he started the engine. Later that evening, he returned to Camille's office. She was alone this time, standing near the window as she flipped through a draft of a proposal. Your handwriting's intense, he said by way of greeting. She looked up. You opened it. I did. Though I'm not sure what this key opens. Camille crossed the room and placed a small square folder on her desk. There's a townhouse in Westbridge, 2 bedrooms, a garden, it's quiet. His breath caught. You bought a place. I already owned it, she said, but I never used it. I thought maybe you and Wyatt could. He stepped back slightly. That's a lot, Camille, I know. You can't just fix everything with money. I'm not trying to fix anything, she said. I'm trying to give you space to breathe. He rubbed the bridge of his nose. You barely know me. I know enough, she said. I know you show up when it matters. I know you put your son before everything, and I know that you've changed the way I look at every day. Eric met her eyes. What happens when you realize I don't belong in your world? You already do, she said, stepping closer. You just haven't accepted it yet. He searched her face, trying to find a reason to walk away, but there wasn't one, none that made sense anymore. Come with me Saturday, she said. There's a gala, the annual Horizon Foundation benefit. You'll need a tux. I'm not sure I'm ready for that kind of spotlight. You won't be in it alone, she said. I'll be right beside you. Saturday arrived like a wave. The gala was held in a ballroom suspended above the skyline, the glass ceiling reflecting stars and candlelight. The moment Eric stepped in, he drew stares, but not the kind he feared. He looked sharp, composed, and undeniably magnetic in the midnight black tux Camille's tailor had delivered that morning. Camille descended the stairs beside him in a sapphire dress that seemed made of starlight. She didn't cling to his arm, she rested her hand there with quiet confidence, like she trusted his presence as much as her own. They mingled through donors, foreign dignitaries, and CEOs. Eric didn't speak unless spoken to, but when he did, people listened. Camille watched him with something close to awe. Near the end of the night, as the music softened and the lights dimmed, Camille led him out to the terrace. The city stretched out below them, slick from rain and glowing like embers. I've been thinking, Eric said, his voice low, about how unlikely all of this is. Camille turned to face him, her expression unreadable. And, I'm not sure what happens next, but I know I want to find out. She reached up, her fingers brushing his jaw. I was afraid you'd say you were walking away. I thought about it, he admitted. But then I realized something. What? I've been running from anything that felt too good to be real. But you make me want to stop running. Camille rested her forehead against his. Then stop. He kissed her softly, fully, like he was finally willing to let the ground fall away beneath him. A month later, the townhouse in Westbridge echoed with Wyatt's laughter as he chased Camille's dog through the garden. Eric leaned against the doorway, coffee in hand, watching the two of them like he still couldn't believe it was real. Camille stepped beside him, barefoot, holding a sketchbook she'd never shown anyone before. You never told me you could draw, he said. You never asked, she replied. He took the sketchbook from her and flipped through it slowly. The last page stopped him cold. It was a pencil drawing of him and Wyatt on the couch, curled together in sleep. You did this. I wanted to remember the first time I saw you two like that. He pulled her into his arms, closing the book gently. You didn't just change our lives, you gave us one. She rested her head against his chest. "And you gave me something I never thought I'd have." "What?" "A reason to come home." As the late sun bled through the trees and Wyatt's laughter rose again, Eric kissed her temple and whispered, "Then let's never leave." The summer morning unfolded with a rare kind of stillness, the kind that made Eric pause in the kitchen doorway, coffee in hand, watching sunlight crawl across the hardwood floor of their new home. Wyatt was outside, already knee-deep in a makeshift science experiment involving soda bottles and string, supervised by Camille's housekeeper, Naya, who had quickly become the boy's favorite adult when Camille or Eric were unavailable. Camille appeared behind him, barefoot and wrapped in the oversized navy robe he had once claimed as his own before she quietly stole it back. Her hair was still damp from the shower, curling slightly at the ends. "I didn't hear you get up," she said, resting her chin on his shoulder. "You were asleep," Eric replied. "Didn't want to wake you. You finally stopped grinding your teeth." "I don't grind my teeth. You do when you're stressed." "I'm not stressed. You were yesterday," she sighed softly. "Board votes coming up. My father's foundation is pushing for a merger I don't want." "Then say no." "It's not that simple." Eric turned, setting down his mug. "Camille, you don't owe them anything. You've been carrying Stanton Global since you were 26. Camille looked at him carefully, her voice quiet. "What if I walk away?" "Then you walk," he said. "And you start something of your own, something that doesn't have their fingerprints all over it." She studied his face as if searching for fear or hesitation, but there was none. Only him, steady, grounded, and maddeningly certain. "I used to think leaving meant losing," she said. "And now I think maybe leaving means finally choosing myself." Eric reached for her hand. "Then let's choose it together." She leaned in and kissed him, not urgently, but with the kind of certainty that left no questions unanswered. By the following week, Camille had made her decision. She called the board together in the private conference wing of Stanton Tower and announced her resignation. No press, no staged farewell, just her voice calm, final, and resolute. She left behind her shares, her title, and the legacy her family had spent decades building. And she didn't look back. Instead, she took a single folder from her desk and walked out, her heels echoing in the marble lobby one last time. Eric waited outside with Wyatt, both of them leaning against the car. Camille didn't say anything at first. She just looked at them, her past behind her, her future in front of her. Wyatt offered her a blue raspberry lollipop. "For bravery," he said. She took it without blinking. "There's something I want to show you," Eric said. They drove 27 minutes north to a quiet stretch of land nestled beneath a canopy of trees. It was nothing more than a wide plot of grass surrounded by old fences and silence. But Camille saw the potential immediately. "You bought this?" she asked, stepping out of the car. "Leased it for now," he said. "But there's room for a studio, maybe a small community center. Honestly, whatever you want it to be." Camille turned to look at him. "You think I'd be good at that?" "I think you were meant for it," Eric said. "You don't need a boardroom to lead. You just need people who believe in something. You've got that." She walked the perimeter slowly, taking it in. The wind stirred her hair, and for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like she was carrying the weight of a dynasty on her back. "I want to build something that doesn't depend on power," she said. "Then let's build it." Over the next 4 months, Camille poured herself into the project. She converted the land into a nonprofit incubator, a space for women-led startups and creative programs for underfunded school districts. Eric handled logistics, permits, and construction timelines. Camille curated partnerships and mentorship programs. Wyatt, ever imaginative, named the place the Lark, explaining that birds should have somewhere safe to land. At the ribbon-cutting ceremony, Camille stood in front of a small crowd of donors, volunteers, and families. She didn't wear a suit. She wore a simple black dress and a silver bracelet that used to belong to her mother. Eric stood just offstage, Wyatt on his shoulders. "I walked away from something I thought I needed," she told the crowd. "What I found instead was purpose, and love, and the reminder that power isn't what you hold, it's what you give." The applause was warm, real, and completely unlike the hollow claps of corporate galas. Afterward, as the sun dipped low and the guests filtered away, Camille stood beneath the archway of the new entrance. Eric approached, hands in his pockets. "There's something I've been meaning to ask," he said. She raised an eyebrow. "I'm listening." He pulled a small velvet box from his jacket. Camille's breath caught. "I didn't want to ask you with fanfare. No rooftop, no orchestra, just here where it all finally makes sense." He opened the box. Inside was a ring, simple, elegant, unmistakably her. "Will you marry me?" Camille's eyes filled, but she didn't blink them away. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes." Eric slid the ring onto her finger, then kissed her in the quiet glow of the new world they'd built together. That night they returned home. Wyatt had fallen asleep in the back seat, and Eric carried him to bed without waking him. Camille waited by the door, watching the way Eric tucked the blanket around the boy's shoulders. When he returned, she took his hand and led him to the kitchen, where a single candle flickered beside a bottle of wine. "No toast?" he asked. She picked up her glass. "To choosing each other." They clinked. They danced barefoot in the kitchen, slow and quiet as the world moved on outside. No more performance. No more pretending, just them, Camille Sullivan, who once ruled towers of glass, and Eric Stanton, who once couldn't afford to dream. Now they dreamed together, and every day forward was one they built hand in hand.